blues fans. So glad you're here. Time for the next episode of This Week of the Blues. I'm your host, Jimbo Big Train Madsen, with the blues band Big Train and the Loco Motives. We're just trying to keep the blues alive, one video, one podcast, one social media post, and when we're out playing, one song at a time. So, we have a great episode this week, so let's take a look and see what happened this week in blues history. Irish blues guitar maestro Rory Gallagher was born March 2nd, 1948. Gallagher formed the band Taste in the late 1960s and recorded solo albums throughout the 1970s and 1980s. His albums have sold over 30 million copies worldwide. Even with a career cut short by illness and a premature death, he left his mark on the blues and the rock world. Queen's Brian May imitated not only his playing, but his gear setup early on. And Eric Clapton said it was Gallagher who got him back into the blues. Blues musician Maxwell Street Jimmy Davis was born March 2nd, 1925 in Tippo, Mississippi. His real name is Charles Thompson, and I'm not sure how or when he went from that to Maxwell Street Jimmy Davis. He played with John Lee Hooker, recorded an album for Elektra Records in the mid-1960s, and remained a regular street musician on Maxwell Street in Chicago for over 40 years. He is best remembered for his songs Cold Hands and Fourth and Broad. Blues singer and guitarist Blind Teddy Darby was born March 2nd in 1906 in Henderson, Kentucky. He moved to St. Louis with his family when he was a child, and his mother taught him to play the guitar. He served some time for selling moonshine, and in 1926, he lost his eyesight because of glaucoma. In the late 1930s, he gave up the blues and became an ordained deacon. But I think you should go out and listen to his earlier stuff. Here's another Mississippi ghost story, although this one is from Texas. So blues guitarist John Smith was born sometime in either 1890 or 1910 and was variously known as the Howlin' Wolf, Funny Papa Smith, Funny Paper Smith, and Howlin' Smith. He married in the 1920s and spent most of the decade busking on the streets and towns around Texas and Oklahoma. His first recordings were made in Chicago in 1930. His guitar was often out of tune, even on some of his recordings. Smith reportedly wore a stovepipe hat with Funny Papa Smith stitched on it. Between September 1930 and April 1935, he recorded 41 songs, but only half of that number were released at the time. Howlin' Wolf guitar genius Willie Johnson was born March 4th, 1923 in Senatobia, Mississippi. His raucous, distorted guitar playing is prominent on Howlin' Wolf's Memphis recordings during the 1951 to 1953 sessions, including the hit song, How Many More Years. Johnson also performed and recorded with other blues artists in the Memphis area, including piano player Willie Love, Willie Nix, Junior Parker, Roscoe Gordon, Bobby Blue Bland, and many others. Blues singer and guitar player Tom Shaw was born March 4th, 1908 in Brenham, Texas. Shaw was taught to play both the harmonica and guitar by his relatives and based his style on his collaborations with Blind Lemon Jefferson, J.T. Smith, and Ramblin' Thomas. After spending time as an itinerant musician in Texas, in 1934 he relocated to California. He continued to perform and appeared on radio before setting up his own club, which he operated for many years. Blues singer and guitarist Peg Leg Howell was born March 5th, 1888, on a farm in Eatonton, Georgia. Howe was one of the first musicians who connected early country blues and the later 12-bar style. He taught himself to play the guitar at the age of 21. He continued working on the farm until he was shot in a fight with his brother-in-law. As a result of the injury, he lost his right leg and began working as a full-time musician. And I'm sure that made for some awkward Thanksgiving dinners. Anyway, in 1923, he moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and began playing on street corners, mainly around Decatur Street. He also served time in prison for bootlegging liquor. Left-handed blues guitarist Johnny Jenkins was born March 5th, 1939 in Macon, Georgia, and played the left-handed guitar upside down. His first band, the Pine Toppers, included a young Otis Redding on lead vocals. Now, his unorthodox guitar style left lasting marks on the young, impressionable Jimi Hendrix, who came out to see Jenkins play while visiting relatives in the Macon area. Later, in 1969, Jenkins and Hendrix teamed up to play together at a New York club called The Scene. Chicago blues guitarist John Primer was born March 5th, 1945 in Camden, Mississippi. Now, by any yardstick, Chicago guitarist John Primer has paid his dues. He played behind Junior Wells in the house band at Teresa's Lounge, and as a member of the bands of Willie Dixon, Muddy Waters, and Magic Slim, before launching an award-winning career as a frontman, carrying forward the traditional Windy City sound into the 21st century. He's one of the last real traditionalists in town. Blues guitarist Walter Trout was born March 6, 1951 in Ocean City, New Jersey. Now, Trout's career began on the Jersey coast scene in the late 1960s and early 70s. He then decided to relocate to Los Angeles, where he became a sideman for John Lee Hooker, Percy Mayfield, Big Mama Thornton, Joe Tex, and many others. In the 1980s, he was the lead guitarist in Canned Heat and the lead guitarist in John Mayall's Blues Breakers. With both groups, Trout recorded and toured worldwide. Country blues guitarist Furry Lewis was born March 6th in either 1893 or 1899 in Greenwood, Mississippi. His family moved to Memphis when he was 7. He acquired the nickname Furry from childhood playmates. By 1908, he was playing solo at parties, in taverns, and on the street. Furry Lewis was the only blues singer of the 1920s to achieve major media attention in the 1960s and 70s. One of the very best blues storytellers and an extremely nimble finger guitarist into his 70s, he was equally adept at blues and ragtime. On March 8, 1940, blues guitarist Bukka White recorded Fixin' to Die Blues in Chicago. The song was written just days before, along with 11 others. White was resuming his recording career after his incarceration for 2.5 years at the infamous Parchman Farm Prison in Mississippi. While there, White witnessed the death of a friend and got to wondering how a man feels when he dies. In 1961, Bob Dylan recorded Fixin' to Die for his debut album. Country blues maestro Mississippi John Hurt was born back on March 8th in 1893 in Avalon, Mississippi. Hurt taught himself to play the guitar around the age of 9. He worked as a sharecropper and began playing at dances and parties, singing to a melodious finger-picking accompaniment. His first recordings, made for OK Records in 1928, were commercial failures, and he continued to work as a farmer. Now, he was tracked down by researchers based on one of his first recordings that mentioned his hometown of Avalon. Well, blues fans, we just covered some of the highlights here. Now, if you want to know more about these artists or the other things that happened this week in the blues, be sure to follow our social media pages or visit our website at bigtrainblues.com. We'll have a brand new episode next week that'll include stories about swamp blues giant Lightnin' Slim and blues guitarist Lightnin' Hopkins. You won't want to miss this electric show. See what I did there? lightning, electric. Anyway, hey, we'll see you next week.